Well, thank you everybody for coming and for being interested in learning about brain donation. I know we were all really excited at just the what? Really? Like tell us more. Um, it was something. I mean, I've heard of other parts of the body being donated, but just specifically, this whole project is it's kind of amazing. So thank you for taking time out to be here. Um, Today, um, Summer is going to welcome us in, um, and yep, and then we'll hear from Yapa.
Okay, thank you. Um, I am Summer. I am one of the doulas in Pro Collective, and also gonna share with us a land acknowledgement and put on a song to kind of rest into our space and reflect a little bit, and then I will pass it along. But I'm going to share my screen here, and I will also read the words on the screen. Let's see. Okay. So if you could take the next few moments here in personal reflection, we suggest that this reflection time is used to honor the history of the land you're on and the community you're within, a sacred passing in many of the Pro Collective doulas. I just noticed 2 typos in the slide and I apologize, but I just have to like take a deep breath because that's not a big deal, but now my heart is like boom, boom. Okay. That's so silly, what the education system does to our brains. Okay, so a few moments in personal reflection here. A sacred passing in Seattle, Washington is located on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself, as well as the Duwamish tribal community. In addition, I think land and acknowledgement, many folks have taught me to also name gentrification. And so taking a moment to name the gentrification within the city of Seattle, which has contributed to a massive displacement of primarily non-white residents and businesses, as well as a housing crisis in the city, particularly with the police brutality we've been seeing over the past few days throughout Seattle, targeting our houseless community. And the erasure of the Duwamish tribe within the educational system with the policies that the state is trying to pass forward. These are not only important moments to consider reflecting on how we contribute to the resistance to this violence, but also in everyday practice, know and be a part of the movements within our communities against these things. And there are many ways to carry out acknowledgement. Naming and discussing these things with one another is one of them. But I'm also going to give some space with some low music on for either silence or for folks to share their own version of an acknowledgement of the land that you're on if we're coming from different spaces. I'm going to stop sharing my screen though and mute myself while I put on some sounds.
Humbly-hearted rise, won't be divided. Rise, with spirit to guide us. Rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here, and we rise. All of the children rise. Elders with wisdom rise. Ancestors surround us. Rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here.
Thank you for taking that time with me and for continuing to take time to support the people that we share this earth with.
Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you.
Yeah, but will you start with sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so actually it's part of my slide, so I can just start my deck.
Okay.
A little bit of myself in there. Let's see. I'm going to hide everybody. So, a little bit about myself. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for their opportunity to be part of this session today. I am excited and I'm grateful too. So before I begin, I wanted to just tell a little bit about myself. I'm currently in the San Francisco Bay Area. My background is in operations. I'm really good at getting things done. I love nature, you can see from my picture. I'm a polymath, so it means I know a lot of things about a lot of things. Sometimes it's hard for people to figure out actually what I'm good at. I deeply care about human experience and how to make it better. And one of the core principles in my life is making sure that I leave things and people better than I found them. I'm also the executive director at the Cure After Foundation, which is a federally recognized nonprofit devoted to improving healthcare. And today, I am going to share a little bit what we do, why we do what we do, why we care about it, a little bit about body and brain donation, because that's the core of Cure After, and why programs and projects like Cure After make wonderful and meaningful legacy projects. That's something I think it's a little bit maybe overlooked and I believe relevant to you and to me. So quickly before I jump, just wanted who is Cure After. I am leading the project and I have a handful of advisors. And we all come from different backgrounds to solve this meaningful problem that I'm going to talk about just in a little bit. So we all share our own individual knowledge. We're scientists, and like David is also a neuroscientist. So it's a variety of people actually who care about this problem I'm going to talk about. And so how did Cure After happen and what it is? So I am part of a community that cares making the world a better place. And it's very important to me to do something where I contribute, not just use. And I was trying to figure out what kind of things I can do and what kind of projects can I work on to make the world a better place for myself and for other people. And one of the things that came out talking to a lot of people was this fact that 90% of clinical trials fail, disappointing families of sick loved ones. And 1/2 of those failures are due to unanticipated human toxicity. The decision to move drug into clinic has until now been made entirely on the basis of animal studies, which are flawed models of human physiology. So any improvement to the process is an improvement for humanity. That's how Hereafter started. I decided that's going to be my problem that I would love to solve. And so this is a graph. It's very kind of standard for drug development. Maybe some of you have seen it. It takes approximately 14 years for one drug to become available to public. Only one drug out of 5,000 actually passes all the clinical trial phases, and it costs millions of dollars. So Hereafter was going to solve initially how to make this whole process better. And they thought that we're going to make it better by using immediately post-death bodies before removal of life support. And that's testing in humans without risk before the IND submission. And IND is this phase in this process when the drug goes from animal study to human study. And by that, if scientists had access to testing drug early on, what kind of efficacy and toxicity is going to have on a human body, they could actually make two kinds of decisions. One, they could fix something that we know is not going to work, make the drug better, so which means they would increase probability for drug to pass the clinical trials. It means maybe more drugs would be available sooner for people, or they would learn something which is not very good, so we can abandon the drug early on and work on something more meaningful that probably has more potential to go through all the clinical trial phase. So when we looked at that graph and like the problem, it became clear that we might actually compete with organ donation, which was not our intent. It's very important that we add something, not take away. So I did a lot of research on organ donation, and this is just a high level. I learned that most organ donors come primarily from accidents, and a lot of cancer patients don't qualify. And that was something actually sad. I did not realize that even if people want to donate their bodies and organs, a lot of times we don't qualify because of certain health conditions. So then we figured out that Hereafter patient donors would come from hospice care, and cancer patients actually would qualify for a lot of studies. And there's this little overlap. There are some tissues actually come from hospices, but it's a very small percentage. So the learning was that actually we would not compete with organ donation, and we would not overlap with donors. So I took a deeper look into body donation because that's where the donors would come from. So I learned that the most common reason people donate bodies for research is to make something positive come from death. And I learned that there are 58 organ procurement organizations in the US called OPOs. I'm going to be using this word later on. And I also learned about body brokers, which have no transparency, and non-university donations often are not even for a truly scientific purpose. That was something I did not actually know before, and it was sad and emotionally disturbing. And you can also see there's a red square. It means I learned something that actually was not very good for our project. I learned about the dead donor rule. And it's a little bit complicated, but I try to make it really clear. So when organ donors are hooked on life support, and before organ procurement, they have to be taken off life support, and medical staff has to wait 5 minutes and to pronounce a person dead, and only then organ procurement can start. Anything before that, it's considered illegal and unethical, because right now anybody on life support is considered to be an alive human. And a side note, actually, I saw while doing research, there is some conversation happening how to rename life support to organ support, because that's what it really is, and it's more accurate and creates more accurate expectations also for people who are going through that. And if you have a loved one on life support, there's no hope that the person necessarily is going to become alive again, because it's not that. So that piece of information meant that we actually cannot proceed with that project, because we cannot test on bodies on life support, because it would be unethical. And being ethical actually and doing everything legally is really important for us, because we do want to be project not shut down, but part of science. And we have to do everything ethically and legally in order actually for scientists to be able to use the tissue that we would provide. So we had to pivot. At the same time, and we are exploring how to make the drug development better, we also explored this different track that came from conversations with neuroscientists about limited availability of functional brain tissue. And when I say functional, what I mean is that brain is not dead. It doesn't mean that it has consciousness. It means that it's preserved in a way that there are still things happening in the brain. And if scientists do research, they would actually learn how the brain works instead of learning just about the structure of the brain. So there are programs right now where scientists can get brain tissue, but it's dead, so we can learn mostly about structure. So we proceeded with that idea and inspiration that, okay, let's look into how to get more functional tissue and if it's needed. So I did a different kind of research, and our mission became to accelerate finding therapies for age-related brain diseases that presently have no cure, because the idea is the world actually would be better, and so much more science would happen if we knew how the brain works. So there's this idea that humanity is doing a pathetic job of curing brain diseases, and obviously that needs to change. You might be wondering what's holding us back. Animals are terrible models of human age-related brain diseases, that their brains are tiny and different, and we don't get human age-related brain diseases. It's not ethical to experiment on live human brains. And all the rest of the research is done on extremely dead human brain tissue, which has undergone massive chemical and physical destruction. Hours of ischemia, it means the brain did not get oxygen, followed by fixation on formalin, which destroys and cross-links biomolecules. So basically, there is no brain available for research for scientists where we could look at it and know what's happening and figure out what kind of medicine to create for brain. So when we looked at that, also dug deeper and talked to different scientists, and we learned that actually there is access to a temporal cortex right now that comes from epileptic people, epileptic tissue, and it's very limited and availability and access. So right now, some scientists have relationships with certain hospitals, and then surgeries are happening. Scientists would go to a hospital and wait for the tissue. They get a really small sample, and they themselves would carry it back to their lab. And here's the whole brain. So you can imagine what kind of science actually is available if scientists have access to functional brain tissue for the rest of the brain, which is not available right now. And just to make sure we are on the same page, when I talk about brain diseases and neurodegenerative diseases, I mean schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's, and many others. And just imagine how the world would look like and how much better it would be if we did have cures for all of these diseases, not just for people with their diseases, but also for people around people with these diseases. It's just much less suffering. So when I did research, it was very important for me then to dig in deeper and to really go and talk to labs to figure out, are labs are really interested if we figure out a way to get this tissue, do scientists really need it, or it's just a philosophical idea? So I learned that actually there are at least 4 research labs in the United States that would love functional brain tissue. And there's at least 1 lab in the United Kingdom. So the learning here was that actually there is a need, and it was really interesting to talk to these research labs and get their overwhelmingly positive feedback that actually such program and project is really needed. And I learned that some people actually try to do this. It's just really complicated to figure out how to. So these are not all the labs. I just needed to figure out that at least there's some labs that need. So that was the goal of it, and we accomplished it. So after that, it was important for us to make sure to figure out, is it ethical to do what we want to do? How is general public going to look at us? And what do we need to think about when working on this project to make sure that we're just ethical and legal? So we created a fractional ethics board, and Karen Rommelfanger is leading it. She's an amazing neuroethicist, and she's on multiple brain initiative programs. So she is helping us to figure out how to be ethical, and also leading us and guiding us to make sure that we are not violating any ethics. And so how are we going to do it? Obviously, there are labs that do need tissue, and there are donors like in any other programs. And this graph seems really simple, but actually is not very simple to do this operational part, how to connect donors to labs. And because we have to take into consideration a lot of different things, not just ethics, and jump a lot of hoops, and keep ethics. Ethics is the core of everything we do and the way we think. And since we are a nonprofit, so all our funding is philanthropic, also get funding for the tech ops. And so after we figure out, okay, this is how we're going to do it, labs need the tissue. And when we're talking to research labs, we also, we're asking scientists, what kind of tissue do they need? And we learned a little bit about their requirements. So I had to go and do more research to figure out what the ideal donor would be. And in the beginning, we thought that actually it's great to provide opportunity for people to be donors and be part of science. For those people who actually would not have necessarily opportunity to be part of scientific research. So we looked at hospice patients, and sadly we learned that active dying is pretty harmful to the brain. So brain goes through a significant damage. So they're not necessarily ideal because it just takes a long time for them to die. And OPOs would be great. Interesting thing there I learned, which I did not realize before, actually brain is not on the list for organ donation. It's not considered an organ. So a couple of things would have to change if we worked with OPOs. First, that brain would have to make to the list, and then they would have to figure out how to inject ourselves to their existing workflow. So it's possible in the future, but it's not just available right now. And then I looked in depth with dignity patients, and we learned actually that's the ideal donor, because they would have the shortest ischemic time, which means that the brain would spend least time without oxygen. I'm going to talk in a little bit how. So when I looked at Deaf with Dignity, actually, I did not know anything before this project. I just knew that such program exists. I looked more into how many states have it. So I learned that there are 9 states, Oregon and Washington are leading. And so the general understanding was that there is at least one person who would love to be a donor, and that's enough for us. And I just have this graph. So even without reading any numbers, you can see 2 lines going up. It means that the programs are not dying. It was very important that actually they are happening. And one question I get very often from people looking at these 2 lines, prescriptions versus deaths, why there's a discrepancy. And you probably know, most people probably don't, that not everybody who gets prescription actually ends up taking it. So Washington State is similar. The program is becoming more popular. Maybe it's not a good word, but it's happening. So there are going to be donors. That was the goal for me to looking at all this data. And so to control ischemic time, we figure out we would have a mobile lab. So we would drive to a person where a person is located. And mobile lab would have a surgical station, vibratomes for slicing, and preservation stations. And that station would have a cryo, which is freezing, and culture, which is an artificial cerebrospinal fluid. And that culture actually is very similar to how our brains are in our bodies. So the brain would last for a long time, and it would be almost no difference. So, but this would allow us actually to control the time, how much damage brain goes through without oxygen by driving to person's house. So a little bit of a nerdy side project factoids. So brain slices would be 300 microns thick, which is 1/3 of a millimeter. It's really tiny, like small. So there's no concern that consciousness would be preserved. It's not possible in that kind of a slice. PMI would be 5, so it means the brain would go through a really short, wouldn't spend much time without oxygen. And preserved tissue in the artificial cerebrospinal fluid would last 2 to 3 weeks, which means that scientists have time to do their experiments. And this also means that we could ship tissue to science labs across the United States and even outside. And we know that the human brain is 1,260 cubic centimeters. So we calculated how big the slice would be if it was 300 microns. So we did the math and figured out that we would have 467,000 slices. Of course, not all of them are valuable for scientists, but you can only imagine how much science and would be available for scientists to do if they had this functional brain tissue. And it's almost like a revolution in a brain, like learning about the brain. And our goal is to have 1 to 4 donors a year. So we don't aim for a very big project. And a little bit about body donation. So when I was doing research, I learned a lot. And the biggest learning was actually that there's a lot of mixed information online, and people are very good at marketing. So if you are looking into organizations to do body donation or know somebody who is doing that, I just wanted to share a couple pieces of information that I found that I think are very important to know. And these 3 questions I would recommend asking when picking the organization. One is if it's affiliated with a university. So all university affiliated body donation organizations are great. They are for scientific research. I have no concerns. How is the body going to be used? This is a tricky one because a lot of body donation organizations claim that the body is going to be used for scientific research. And I recommend asking what kind of scientific research, dig deeper, and make sure that you know that it's not going to be sent somewhere to do military testing or to a car manufacturer to see what kind of impact body goes through in a car accident. And when are you going to get remains back? Oops, typo. This is something maybe not important for some people, but if that's important to you, you should ask that, because from my research, I saw that sometimes people do not get remains back, or sometimes it takes longer than 4 months. So it's something, if it's important to you. And you might wonder how to donate for Cure After. So currently we do not accept donations. We still have work to do, but feel free to email together@cureafter.com. And I usually respond within a day or two. I'm happy to send you updates and keep you updated with where we are at with our project and when we are actually open for donations. One thing I wanted to say, there are some programs currently there that do accept brain for donation, and those programs actually fix the brain in a way that it's dead. So scientists do have access to dead brain tissue, but not functional brain tissue. There is no program currently that has a functional brain tissue available for scientific research. And to kind of end my presentation, I wanted to leave you with this wonderful TED Talk by Sam Rodriguez. He's one of our advisors. He's an amazing, inspiring young scientist, really loved and adored in scientific community. And a lot of times he can talk very nerdy and I might not understand a lot of things. This TED Talk actually is really inspiring, and I personally watched it 5 times. It's about the brain and what we will learn about it in the next century. I highly recommend watching it. It's on a cureafter.com website, or I can send a link after. And I would love to stay in touch. Feel free to email any feedback, questions, whenever, after today or later, to together@cureafter.com. I'm pretty good at responding, or connect with us on Instagram. So thank you. I hope you learned something and useful today.
Thank you. Yeah, my mind is spinning. What are folks thinking?
You can say anything, I won't get offended.
I'm stuck on the oh, was someone going to talk?
I just had a quick question about the interest of non-neurotypical brains for research. Is that something that has come up in your research?
Not neurotypical, what does that mean?
Brains that might have, for example, different kinds of, like Arnold Chiari brains. That's a very interesting one, I find, or brains that have suffered with hydrocephalus or anything like that.
Yeah, so I did not add that to my deck, but talking to scientists, I thought that, for example, if scientists are working on curing Alzheimer's, for example, they are interested only in Alzheimer's brain, but it goes back to your point, actually, all kinds of brains are needed healthy too, to learn about the brain, how all of those brains are different and what the difference is. So yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. I probably should like proactively add that when I talk about Cure After.
I'm really stuck on the size of the amount of tissue that's needed. Like, it's so little.
So yeah, one you mean that one brain would provide almost 500? Oh, the small one. Yeah, that's enough. It's really important. I think the hardest thing for us as humans, as people, and ethically was figure out making sure that there is no consciousness in the slice. because that's the biggest concern for a lot of people. And I would not want to do it myself. And it's very important too that it's just consciousness doesn't live there. So in that slice, that's not, but that slice is just like what's enough actually for scientists too.
Yeah, I thought that that was incredible. Just that they're like, not only that that was a question, because once you said it, I was like, oh yeah, of course that's a concern. But then when you had an answer to it also, like this is how much brain to make sure that that's not an issue. I was like, holy crap, science is so cool. I also just had a really visceral memory of I saw a brain slice in a science museum when I was in elementary school, and I had totally forgotten about it until just now. And I'm like, oh, I've seen a slice. So that's kind of a fun memory.
Thank you for sharing that.
Now, what's like the best way for, I want to go tell everybody to donate their brain. Like, you know, it's how long till you're going to be needing brains? Like I really, this is beyond interesting to me. My grandma died of complications from Alzheimer's, but beyond that, it's so, you know, I feel like, what's the best way to educate everybody about this? And so it catches on, because we have to change everything's changing. It needed to change. So normalizing this, I feel super important.
It's interesting. So when I talk to different people, I get very different responses. I was curious what kind of responses I'm going to get today. Brain is like the essence of a human, right? So for a lot of people, it's very shocking. It's like normalizing talking about death is one thing. Organ donation is the second topic, but brain donation is really shocking for a lot of people, I find, because like, how can you give away somebody for research? And it's a good question how to. So I decided just talking. I would donate my brain. I want to donate my brain for research.
Me too.
Yeah. I feel talking about it and you know, from your own hearts, probably that's what's going to reach other people, and more people connecting to that, they're going to share more. So I think that's organ donation, for example, is facing very similar issue. We don't have enough organ donors, and it's because of the same missing information. And what I think I found, there's a lot of not nice organizations and people using organs and bodies for wrong reasons. So I think that just gets out too. So I think just like sharing, I wish I had one answer. I'm trying to figure out that too.
It's kind of like, so it, you know, I don't even know how to say it. It's more, how long do you think it's going to be, or what are your next steps till, you know, you're in that accepting mode?
For us, I think it's going to be probably 6 to 12 months, realistically. Philanthropic funding has been not happening because of the election. So we're just restarting that. And we need to figure out the mobile lab. After we have a mobile lab, that's going to be pretty quick. And yep.
Okay. So is it like funding's holding the story?
Yeah.
Topic? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, feel free to email me if you would like to stay in touch. And also on our website, I imagine once they're ready, I'm going to add the message that they're ready. We have to figure out a lot of things to be ready, just to make sure we are doing it ethically and legally too.
I had a question regarding the ethics of, there's a lot of interesting research that has been done of growing tissue in a lab. Would that work for your purpose, or do you want specifically like tissue straight from a human? Because I know it can be grown from that same cell. Would it behave differently?
We did not look into that, and I'm not a scientist to know the specifics, but my initial thought is if scientists are not interested in it, probably it's different than the actual human brain tissue,
Mhm.
because they do grow mice tissue. So there are a lot of like modified mice out there that they use tissue, so it's available. But I just don't believe brain is such a complicated organ that it's hard to just grow it and have it function in the same way that it functions in us.
Mhm. There has been a research study in the University of Mexico where they're trying to grow different parts of the nervous system. So they're growing like, just like the cerebellum and below, but the brain is always the issue that they're like, where do we go? How do we go from here? So that would be interesting to see how that would impact ethics, because I know that that's always a huge, stopper in just development. I wonder if cultural relativism could play into, what you're talking about as well, because I know there are certain countries that don't necessarily value the brain over like the heart, for example, or the stomach or things like that. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in the future. Do you have any plans on expanding perhaps to those types of countries with ideas like that?
So far, we are starting small. It's very important, just to start somewhere to make sure it's working. We're doing everything ethically. We have operations. So we're staying on the West Coast because that's where death with dignity is just mostly practiced, and there's enough conversation happening about it. Yep. I don't know. I know that there had been other programs and attempts to do what we are doing and other kinds of things, preserving consciousness. And some of them have been shut down because they have been perceived not being ethical. So it's hard for me to answer and even know because I'm not an ethicist. And when I start thinking about it, I can go to multiple directions because it's so complicated.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking that.
You know me, and I like my liking to leave space for folks to just think for a minute. Like for the death care world, that conversation was really sciency for the ways that at least I get to engage in education. It's definitely much. That was a lot of science for me for a little bit, instead of like a process type of science, but like a conceptually crunching bit of science. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'm happy to make it even more compact into maybe 2-sheeter if you think it's valuable to pass along to the people. Especially I think when I started working on this project, what I didn't know a lot about drug development. I think mostly just people in pharma or biotech know more about it and how long it takes and what kind of hoops they have to go through and what happens. I think that was the saddest part, and how, for example, having functional brain tissue and having all access to that information would help actually to create cures for neurodegenerative diseases, which I believe is really would make a huge difference in the world.
If you want to create a 2-sheeter, a PDF, we would be really, really happy to put it on all of the web pages as a resource, and
happy to do that
and share it out with folks. Put a little link to it in the newsletter.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions before we wrap up tonight? We are mighty punctual, folks. I'm going to stop this recording.